Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we step gently into the soft, glowing heart of a story whispered through the candlelit corridors of Hogwarts. A story not of grand battles or daring escapes, but of quiet wonder and a dormitory that no one remembered building. The castle is still tonight, not a rustle from the forbidden forest, not a footstep in the great hall. The old stones hum with ancient secrets, but only softly, like a lullaby long forgotten. And in one quiet corner of this beloved school, a mystery slowly begins to unfold, not with a bang, but with the hush of a door that didn't used to exist. Before we drift further into our magical tale, if this kind of sleepy Hogwarts adventure brings a little warmth to your night, feel free to like, subscribe, or explore more cozy stories after this one ends. But for now, rest easy. You're already where you need to be. We begin in the Ravenclaw common room, just as the sky outside has turned a soft, silvery blue. That delicate moment between twilight and nightfall. The tall windows curve like graceful scrolls, letting moonlight spill across the mosaic-tiled floor. Candles float gently in the air, their flames flickering in rhythm with the breeze that slips in from the towers above. Books line the walls like loyal companions. Some snore softly when not being read. Others, with shimmering covers, flutter their pages as if sighing in sleep. The fire in the hearth crackles in the most polite way possible, not too loud, just enough to warm toes and hearts. Outside, the lake gleams like a mirror, holding the stars like secrets. The castle towers rise calmly, wrapped in ivy and magic, while owls pass by with silent wings, delivering nothing urgent. Just dream-laced letters and parchment full of thoughts. Tonight is quiet. No lessons to worry over, no exams to fear, just the soft lull of Hogwarts breathing in the dark and the steady comfort of walls that have stood for centuries. And in this calm, we find a young student nestled in a high-backed chair near the window. A Ravenclaw 5th year, eyes half closed, parchment dangling loosely from one hand, quill long forgotten. They think they're the last one awake, safe in the comforting hum of their familiar surroundings. But somewhere, just a few floors below, the castle has quietly grown a hallway that didn't used to be there. A hallway with a single wooden door. And behind that door, something slumbers, waiting, not with menace, no, nothing so unkind. It waits with stillness, with forgotten breath, like a lullaby waiting to be heard again. Sleepy footsteps will find it soon, and when they do, the dormitory that wasn't there will finally begin its tale. In the heart of Ravenclaw Tower, where stars hang low and the ceilings curve like the arches of ancient libraries, lives a quiet student named Luna Lovegood. It's her 5th year at Hogwarts, and though she's often thought of as dreamy or strange, there's a particular stillness to Luna that seems to understand the hush between the notes of a song. She notices things others don't. Things like dust motes swirling in candlelight, or doors that shouldn't be there. Tonight, Luna is curled up near the fire, wearing thick woolen socks with tiny dancing moons stitched across the toes. Her wand rests beside her, not forgotten, just sleeping. A sketch pad lies open on her lap, filled with softly drawn images of magical creatures most people think are imaginary, the kind only Luna could truly believe in or see. Nearby sits Neville Longbottom, carefully tending to a small potted plant that seems far too leafy for its ceramic cup. He murmurs to it gently, tucking in a stray leaf before glancing toward Luna. They've formed a quiet sort of friendship, the kind made of long silences that feel full instead of empty. Neville likes the peace Luna brings. She reminds him that the world doesn't always have to be rushed or loud to be magical. Nargles? Neville asks, nodding toward her sketchpad. Not this time, Luna replies, tilting her head. This one's a whisper bloom. They only grow in places no one remembers. Neville blinks, not quite sure what to say, but smiles anyway. Luna's words often float past like snowflakes, soft, strange, and oddly comforting. Just across the room, curled near a stack of herbology books, Ginny Weasley is dozing off, her red hair glowing like a candle's flicker. She had come up to study for a quiz, but the warmth of the fire and the softness of the armchair have claimed her. Occasionally, she mumbles half sentences about broomsticks or Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. This small trio, Luna, Neville, and Ginny, share something more than just a common room tonight. They share a quiet yearning, a sense that Hogwarts is more than what's written in the textbooks, that behind its moving staircases and enchanted portraits, something deeper is waiting to be found, not with wands drawn, but with eyes open and hearts still. It's Luna who first hears it, a tiny hum, soft as breath, coming from somewhere behind the library shelves. Neville doesn't hear it. Ginny's still half asleep, but Luna stands slowly, barefoot now, her sketchpad gently closed. The castle has called to her before, with dreams, with whispers in the wind, and once with a book that turned to feathers. She looks over her shoulder, not afraid, just curious. Then she quietly whispers, "There's something new." She doesn't know yet that what she's about to find isn't just a room, but a memory Hogwarts forgot, and perhaps a part of herself she hasn't met yet. Luna moved through the Ravenclaw common room as though she were walking through a dream she already understood. Her steps were slow, unhurried, and entirely silent against the cool stone floor. The faint hum she'd heard earlier hadn't returned, but that didn't trouble her. Hogwarts had never been the sort of place that repeated itself just to be convincing. It preferred patience. Neville followed a few paces behind, still holding the potted plant he'd been fussing over moments ago. Ginny, now fully awake, but still wrapped in a drowsy calm, trailed after them, her cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. "Are you sure?" Ginny whispered, glancing around. "I didn't hear anything." "That's all right," Luna replied softly. "Some things don't make noise the way we expect. They wait until you're quiet enough to notice them." They passed between the tall shelves of books that lined the far side of the common room. Most of the books were asleep, their spines dimmed and their pages still. But as Luna drew closer to the wall behind the shelves, something subtle shifted. The air felt warmer there, not warmer like firelight, warmer like breath. Neville paused. "Do you feel that?" Ginny nodded slowly, like the room's leaning in, Luna smiled, pleased. She reached out and rested her palm flat against the stone wall. The surface felt smooth, familiar, exactly as it should have been, and yet, beneath her hand, there was a gentle vibration, like the echo of footsteps far below ground. She closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, very quietly, the wall sighed, not audibly, not dramatically. It was the kind of sigh a room might make when it's been holding on to something for a very long time and finally decides to let it go. A thin line appeared in the stone, glowing faintly, not bright, not alarming, just enough to notice. The line traced the outline of a door. Ginny inhaled softly. That wasn't there before. No, Neville said, eyes wide but calm. I'm sure it wasn't. The stone within the outline shimmered, then slowly receded, folding inward like a page turning in a book. Where there had been solid wall moments before, there was now a narrow corridor, softly lit, carpeted in deep blue, with lanterns floating at even intervals along the ceiling. The corridor smelled faintly of clean linen and old wood. Luna stepped forward without hesitation. Neville hesitated only a second before following. Ginny glanced once over her shoulder at the common room, still warm, still familiar, then stepped in as well. The stone behind them slid back into place with a quiet click, sealing the entrance. But none of them felt trapped. If anything, the corridor felt welcoming, as though it had been waiting patiently for footsteps again. The hallway curved gently, never straight for long. The lanterns didn't flicker, they glowed steadily, their light soft enough that shadows pooled gently at the edges. Along the walls were framed photographs, but not moving ones. Still images, sepia-toned and calm. Neville slowed to look at one. A group of students sat on beds arranged in a circular dormitory, all reading quietly. None of the faces were familiar, yet something about them felt known. They're wearing old uniforms, Ginny murmured. Luna nodded. Very old. They continued, passing more images. Students sleeping beneath thick blankets, someone writing a letter by candlelight, a girl pressing her ear to a wall, smiling as though listening to something just out of reach. At the end of the corridor stood another door. This one was wooden, smooth and slightly worn, not neglected, just used. A small brass plaque was affixed near the top. It didn't bear a house name. It didn't list a year. It simply read, "For those who couldn't sleep." Neville swallowed gently. That's specific. Luna reached for the handle. It was warm beneath her fingers. The door opened inward without a sound. Beyond it lay a dormitory, circular, spacious, and impossibly cozy. The ceiling curved high overhead, painted with a slow-moving night sky. Beds lined the walls, each one neatly made, each with a small bedside table and a lamp glowing faintly like starlight. The air felt peaceful, deeply peaceful, the sort of peace that settled into the chest rather than hovering in the air. Ginny stepped inside first, her voice barely a whisper. "It's beautiful." Neville nodded, his eyes drawn to the center of the room, where a low table held a stack of folded blankets and a single open book. The pages turned slowly on their own, though no wind stirred them. Luna wandered toward one of the beds and ran her fingers along the quilt. It was warm, as though someone had just risen from it. People slept here, she said quietly. People who didn't fit into the other dormitories, or who needed something different. Neville approached the book. The text wasn't written in ink, but in something softer, impressions, like pressed flowers or faded memories. As he leaned closer, words formed. This room exists for those who wake when others sleep, for those whose minds wander when the castle rests, for those who listen when the walls whisper. Ginny sat down on the edge of a bed, her expression thoughtful. Why doesn't anyone remember it? Luna closed the book gently, the pages settling with a contented sigh. I think the room only appears when it's needed, and when it's not, it lets itself be forgotten. Neville felt a soft warmth spread through his chest, not excitement, not fear, just understanding. A sound drifted through the room then, not a voice exactly, more like a murmur, layered and low. It didn't form words, but it carried meaning, comfort, recognition. Ginny tilted her head. Is it happy? Yes, Luna said, relieved. The lamps dimmed slightly, and the ceiling sky deepened, stars glowing brighter. One by one, the beds emitted a soft hum, as though echoing the same lullaby the room had been holding for centuries. Neville found himself sitting without remembering choosing a bed. The mattress was firm but welcoming. He exhaled slowly. I've never been in a place like this, he said. It feels like it knows you. That's because it does, Luna replied. It was built from listening. They stayed there for a while. No one checked the time. No one spoke above a whisper. Eventually, the hum softened, and the lamps brightened again. The door opened quietly behind them, revealing the corridor once more. Ginny stood, stretching. Do you think it'll still be here tomorrow? Luna smiled gently. If someone needs it. They stepped back into the corridor, which seemed shorter now, more familiar. The photographs on the walls glowed softly as they passed, as though acknowledging them. When they emerged back into the Ravenclaw common room, the fire was still burning low. The books slept on their shelves. Nothing appeared out of place. The wall behind the shelves was solid stone once more, but the warmth remained. Luna returned to her chair, sketchpad open again, and began to draw. Not the room, but the feeling it had left behind. Neville placed his plant back on the table, adjusting its leaves with care. Ginny yawned, smiling. I think I'll sleep well tonight. Luna looked up, her eyes bright and calm. I think the castle will too. And somewhere deep within Hogwarts, a dormitory that wasn't there settled back into its quiet rest, content to wait until it was needed again. The stillness of the night deepened across Hogwarts Castle. Outside, the moon had drifted slightly in the sky, casting different angles of silver light through the long arched windows of the corridors. Most of the castle remained quiet. In the Ravenclaw common room, the fireplace had burned down to glowing embers, casting a sleepy hue across the soft blue and bronze interior. One by one, the students had yawned, stretched, and made their way up the winding staircases to their dormitories. But not Ellie. Ellie had lingered, not out of fear, but a curiosity that refused to rest. The memory of the missing dormitory still tugged at her thoughts. Her room wasn't missing. It never existed, according to everyone else. And yet she remembered it so clearly. The smell of lavender in the sheets, the four-poster bed near the arched window, the little carved owl on the bedpost, even the voice of someone, a roommate perhaps, softly humming before sleep. She remembered all of it, like remembering a half-finished sentence. Instead of heading up to the girls' dormitory, Ellie quietly made her way to the library. She didn't expect to find answers. She just felt drawn there, as though the books might whisper back something forgotten. The corridors were cool and quiet. Paintings slumbered in their frames, and suits of armor stood motionless, their enchanted gleams dimmed, as if respecting the silence of the late hour. When she reached the tall, arched doors of the library, Ellie hesitated for just a breath, then pressed the handle. The library opened with a gentle sigh. No lanterns were lit, but soft moonlight flooded in through the high windows, enough to cast a pale glow over the endless rows of bookshelves. Ellie stepped inside, her footsteps muffled by thick rugs and time-worn wood. A few floating candles hovered lazily near the ceiling, flickering as if they too were drifting off to sleep. She wandered past the herbology section, past history of magic, past even the restricted section, then paused. One book lay on a pedestal near the back wall. It hadn't been there before. Ellie was certain of it. She knew this shelf. The spot had always held a cluster of dusty almanacs that no one ever touched, but now there was just this one book. A plain spine, no title, drawn by something she couldn't explain. Ellie reached out and opened it. The pages were empty, until they weren't. A line of text began to write itself in neat, slow ink across the top of the page. You remember what others forgot. That means it still exists. Her breath caught in her throat. More lines appeared. The room isn't lost. It's simply folded. To see it again, you must step where the castle bends. Ellie blinked, reading the phrases again and again. Folded? What did that mean? The page didn't turn. It remained there, waiting. She whispered softly, where the castle bends. A memory surfaced, that hallway near the north tower, the one where the wall seemed to curve ever so slightly, as though the stones hadn't been laid straight. It had always felt oddly narrow, even though it wasn't. The place where the paintings didn't speak, where the echoes seemed slower. We didn't know why she knew it, but she did. Leaving the book behind, Ellie turned and walked quickly, softly, through the silent corridors once more. The castle seemed to hum around her, not loudly, but gently, like a tune nearly out of hearing. The torches didn't light themselves as she passed. Instead, the glow of moonlight followed her from window to window, as though guiding her. And then she was there, the hallway near the north tower, the bend in the stone, the place no one ever seemed to linger. She stopped at the point where the corridor curved slightly to the left. The stones under her feet were smooth here, not worn from foot traffic like other parts of the castle. Ellie raised her hand and gently pressed it to the wall. Nothing happened. She closed her eyes, focused, remembered the smell of lavender, the owl carved on the bedpost, the soft sound of humming, and then she stepped forward. The wall shimmered, not with light, but with memory. For just a moment, The air tasted different, like the scent of books and warmth and fresh sheets. And then she was inside, not just anywhere, but back in the room. It looked exactly as she remembered it. A soft, rounded chamber with sky blue walls. 3 beds, one of them hers. The same owl carving, a window where the moonlight poured in like water through crystal. The air felt gentle, welcoming, ancient. There was no dust, no sign of time having passed. It was as though it had been waiting for her return. Ellie walked slowly toward her bed, fingers brushing the quilt. She sat down gently. The room didn't speak. It remembered, and then she heard it. A hum. So soft she almost thought it was the wind. It wasn't. She turned her head. In the far corner of the room stood another girl. Not a ghost, not an illusion, a real girl. She had curly brown hair, a nightgown with star patterns, and eyes wide with recognition. "You found it too," the girl whispered, voice trembling. Ellie nodded. "I think we were both supposed to." The girl, her name, Ellie suddenly remembered, was Mara. Took a step closer. "I kept thinking it was just a dream," Mara said, blinking. "I told the others once, but they said this room doesn't exist, that I was just imagining it. So I stopped talking about it. But I knew it was real." Ellie gave a small, emotional laugh. "Me too." The room seemed to shimmer with quiet approval. They sat down side by side on the bed, not needing to speak for a moment, just breathing, letting the room hold them. Finally, Mara said softly, "Why did it vanish?" Ellie looked around. "I don't know. Maybe the castle hides things until someone remembers them. Or maybe," Mara said thoughtfully, "it gives us spaces that are only meant to be found when we need them." Ellie smiled. A slow warmth spread through the room. The walls glowed faintly, not with magic, but with comfort, like the dormitory itself was stretching awake from a long, peaceful nap. And just then, the soft chime of a bell echoed in the distance, not an alarm, a calling, a gentle sound to return. "We should go back," Ellie said. Mara nodded. "But now, we know. We'll always know." They stood, hand in hand, for just a moment, and stepped once more through the bend, back into the corridor, back into the world where the room wasn't there. But now, it didn't feel lost. It felt remembered. The next day unfolded quietly at Hogwarts. The usual morning chatter in the great hall, the clinking of spoons and porridge bowls, and the flutter of owls delivering letters brought the castle back to life. Yet for Ellie, something had changed. The events of the night before lingered like a soft fog in her thoughts. She'd stepped into a room that officially didn't exist, seen another girl, Mara, who had also remembered what had supposedly been forgotten, and returned to the corridor with no evidence that any of it had happened. But Ellie knew, and Mara knew. That was enough, for now. She glanced across the Ravenclaw table, half expecting Mara to be seated nearby. But she wasn't. Not at Hufflepuff or Gryffindor either. Ellie's eyes subtly scanned the tables, but Mara was nowhere in sight. Had she been real, or had the room folded her back into secrecy again? After breakfast, Ellie slipped away from her friends and headed toward the library again. Something about the mysterious book from last night still pulled at her. She needed to see it again. The corridors were bright with morning sun, but Ellie moved as if tracing yesterday's moonlit steps. When she entered the library, Madame Pince was busy dusting the shelves. Her usual scowl softened in the morning stillness. Ellie quietly walked past her and back to the pedestal. The book was gone. Ellie paused, then moved closer to where it had been. In its place was a tiny slip of parchment, no larger than a chocolate frog card. She picked it up. On the parchment, written in the same delicate ink as before, were 3 words: "Follow the echo." Ellie read it twice, heart beating slightly faster. The echo? Of what? She turned, and the quiet sound of footsteps faded. Only they weren't hers. A second set, soft, slow, she followed through the long central row of shelves, around a dusty reading table, and then silence, until a click echoed faintly through the stillness. It came from the far left wall of the library, an area of oversized atlases and castle maps. She crept toward it, heart thudding quietly, and found one of the larger wall scrolls pulled slightly askew. Behind it, hidden like an old secret, was a small door, only big enough to crawl through. Ellie knelt. The door wasn't locked. It simply waited. She pushed it open and slipped inside. The tunnel was narrow, barely lit by flickering torches placed in ancient brackets along the walls. Dust floated lazily through the air, yet the tunnel didn't feel threatening. It felt preserved, like a memory made solid. She moved slowly, her hand trailing along the stone wall. The tunnel twisted downward in a gentle slope, the sound of her footsteps echoing faintly, until the echo split. She paused. There it was again, the second echo. Not just her steps, but another set, lighter, familiar. "Mara?" she whispered. The echo stopped. Then a voice, soft and clear. "You came back." Ellie rounded a corner and saw her, Mara, seated cross-legged on the stone floor, a warm lantern beside her and a scroll unrolled before her. She looked up with a calm smile, as if she had been expecting her. "I didn't want to lose it again," Mara said, "so I stayed nearby." Ellie sat down beside her, noticing the scroll. It was filled with drawings, maps of the castle, but not the ones students saw every day. These were older and strange. Some rooms were marked only with question marks. Some corridors led nowhere, or perhaps elsewhere. "Where did you get this?" Ellie asked, gently tracing a line on the parchment. "It was in the dormitory," Mara said softly, "under the pillow, like it was meant for whoever found their way back." Ellie studied the parchment more closely. There, near the bend of the north tower, was a marking in swirling ink, "Room of Memory." She touched the word and shivered slightly. It was a beautiful name, and it felt true. "But why is it hidden?" Ellie asked. Mara looked up, her expression thoughtful. "I think Hogwarts doesn't always want to be seen. Sometimes it wants us to remember something important, or to notice what we've forgotten." They sat in quiet for a moment, the air filled with the comforting scent of aged parchment and faint hints of lavender. The lantern flickered gently between them, casting a warm circle of light. Then Ellie asked, Did anyone else ever live in that dormitory, or was it just us? Mara hesitated. I've seen other names scratched into the bedposts, old ones, some I recognized from portraits. Ellie's breath caught. So the room, it's been there for generations? Mara nodded. I think so. Maybe every few decades, someone remembers it, and maybe every time, the castle allows them back in. A silence stretched between them, not awkward, but thoughtful. Then Ellie leaned closer. Do you want to find out more? Mara smiled. Yes. They stood, took the scroll, and began to explore the tunnel further. The path eventually opened into a rounded alcove with high curved walls. On the stone were carvings, runes, softly glowing in pale blue. The carvings weren't threatening. They shimmered like constellations. In the center of the alcove stood a pedestal. Resting atop it was a circular stone medallion with the Hogwarts crest. But it had something different, a fifth emblem in the center. Not a house symbol, not any known magical artifact. Ellie reached toward it. The stone pulsed faintly beneath her fingers. Then a faint voice whispered, not in the air, but in her heart. When what is lost is remembered, the castle breathes anew. Ellie stepped back, eyes wide. Mara stared at the medallion, awestruck. I think it's part of Hogwarts, she said slowly. Not just the walls, but its memory. Ellie nodded. Maybe this is how Hogwarts keeps things safe, hidden in its own past. They didn't take the medallion. They didn't need to. The room had given them something far more important, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of quiet mystery. They returned to the tunnel in silence. Before leaving, Ellie turned once more to look behind them, and there, carved above the archway they had just passed through, was a new inscription that hadn't been there before. Rememberers shall find what others forget. She smiled. The tunnel led them back near the Ravenclaw common room, and when they emerged, morning had turned into early afternoon. Sunlight poured through the enchanted windows, and the ordinary world of classes, textbooks, and classmates waited. But for Ellie and Mara, nothing was quite ordinary anymore. They had touched a forgotten part of Hogwarts, and now it had remembered them too. The days that followed moved with the quiet rhythm of early autumn, when the leaves outside the castle turned gold and crimson, and the wind that rustled through the windows brought with it a sense of change. Classes continued, laughter echoed in the courtyards, and lanterns flickered warmly through the halls of Hogwarts. But for Ellie and Mara, something deeper unfolded beneath the surface, something only they could feel. Their secret connection to the hidden dormitory, to the ancient tunnel, and the glowing medallion had become a quiet truth between them. They spoke of it in hushed corners of the library, shared glances when passing familiar doorways, and carried a sense of purpose that no one else around them could quite understand. One evening, after dinner, Mara approached Ellie with a question written on a small slip of parchment. Should we go back tonight? Ellie didn't need time to decide. She nodded and tucked the note into her robe. Whatever the dormitory was, a memory, a message, a magical heartbeat, it was calling them again. That night, under the pale light of the rising moon, they met once more near the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. As before, there was no grand gesture, no spell, no magical password. But as the two girls stood side by side, remembering, truly remembering, the stone wall rippled softly, and the doorway appeared. The dormitory was just as they'd left it. The beds were neatly made, though no one else had touched them. The gentle hum of enchantment still drifted through the air like a distant lullaby. And in the center of the room, laid carefully on a cushioned bench, was something new. A book. It was bound in forest green leather, embossed with silver stars. No title, just the shimmer of ancient magic around its edges. Ellie stepped forward first, her fingertips grazing the cover. As she opened it, the pages glowed faintly, not blinding, not loud, but gentle the way memories feel when they surface in dreams. The book was filled with names, dozens of them, all written in different handwriting, across different decades, perhaps even centuries. Each name was followed by a date and a message. Some messages were brief. I saw the stars move. The room helped me remember who I am. The castle speaks in silence. Others were longer, personal stories of discovery, of comfort, of loneliness softened by the room's quiet magic. Mara leaned over and whispered, "It's a memory journal." Ellie nodded slowly. Each person who found this room left a piece of themselves behind. She turned to a blank page near the back. A quill lay nearby, placed with intention. "What should we write?" Mara asked. Ellie thought for a moment. Then she picked up the quill and wrote, "We found this place not by accident, but by listening to the castle, to ourselves. It gave us silence when the world was loud. We leave behind our names, not to be known, but to remind the next person, you are not alone. This room remembers." She signed both of their names, Ellie and Mara, and then closed the book gently. A soft breeze moved through the room, as if in response. It was then that they noticed something else had changed. Along the far wall of the dormitory, behind a sheer curtain of soft silver thread, was a second doorway, one that hadn't been there before. Mara moved closer, pulling aside the curtain. The door was small and round, like the entrance to a hidden garden. There was no handle, only an inscription glowing softly in the dim light. "Choose not to forget." The girls looked at each other. "What do you think is behind it?" Mara asked. Ellie shrugged gently. "Another piece of the castle, maybe. Or another piece of ourselves." She stepped forward, placed her palm on the door, and slowly pushed. It opened into a tiny room, not larger than a storage cupboard, but inside were shelves lined with items: an old Ravenclaw scarf, a pair of worn gloves, a drawing of the Forbidden Forest, a broken wand, a folded letter sealed in wax. Memories, not artifacts. Memories. This was a place for safekeeping, for holding things others weren't ready to forget, but couldn't quite carry either. Mara reached for the letter. She didn't open it, just held it in her hands and closed her eyes. Ellie found a tiny mirror with runes etched along its edges. She held it to the light and saw herself, not as she was now, but younger, nervous. The girl who'd first arrived at Hogwarts, unsure if she belonged. Tears welled in her eyes, not out of sadness, but from the deep calm of seeing her whole self remembered. They stood in silence for a long while, surrounded by echoes of other lives, other students, other quiet hearts who had once walked the same halls and found their way to this hidden place. And then, with gentle hands, they each added something of their own. Mara placed a small ribbon from her first magical creature class, a symbol of the day she learned to trust her curiosity. Ellie tucked a folded parchment with the words she had written into the journal, a copy left behind like a whisper. Then they closed the door. No spells, no dramatic farewells, just two girls stepping away, hearts full, knowing they'd contributed to something older and deeper than they could explain. As they returned to the dormitory, Ellie whispered, "Do you think it'll still be here if we come back?" Mara smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe it's only here when someone needs it most." Ellie glanced around one last time. "Then I hope someone finds it again." They left the room hand in hand. As the door vanished behind them, the corridor grew quiet once more, but in the hush of Hogwarts' endless night, the castle breathed, just slightly, as if sighing in contentment. Some rooms are hidden, not because they're forbidden, but because they're sacred, and some doors return only for those who choose to remember. The next day brought with it a soft, golden fog that curled around the edges of the windows like a sleepy morning blanket. In the great hall, the candles floated a little lower than usual, and the usual chatter of students was hushed. Ellie and Mara moved through their day with a quiet energy, not distracted, but distant. Something lingered in their minds, a sense that the dormitory had more to reveal, and it was waiting. That evening, the two girls didn't need to speak a word. They met again by the familiar stone wall, and with a shared breath, stepped once more into the room that wasn't there. But this time, it felt different. The room glowed more warmly than before, as if it had been expecting them. The fireplace was lit with soft lavender flames that flickered without heat. The book they had written in still lay on the bench, but now it was open, turned to a page they hadn't seen before. And above the fireplace, something shimmered. It was a painting framed in old oak. The surface glowed like a memory waking up. The scene was not of a person or a landscape, but of the room itself, the very dormitory they stood in. But in the painting, it was filled with students, not current ones, not anyone they recognized, but students from long ago, sitting on the beds, reading books, laughing softly. The room in the painting pulsed with life. And then, one of the figures moved. Ellie gasped. The portrait wasn't just magical, it was aware. A girl in the painting stood up and looked directly at them. Her eyes were kind, her robes a faded blue with an embroidered vine curling down the sleeve. She seemed around their age, but her presence was ancient, like a whisper passed down through generations. She stepped closer to the frame and spoke, her voice soft but clear, as if echoing from far away. "You've seen the door, you've remembered the names, now you're ready to understand." Mara stepped forward. "Understand what?" The girl in the painting smiled gently. "This room exists because of longing. It was built by magic that remembers, not facts, not spells, but feelings. When Hogwarts couldn't hold all the hearts that needed comfort, this dormitory appeared. Ellie blinked. So, it's alive? The castle? It always has been, the girl replied, but not with thoughts, with memory, with feeling. Every stone, every hall, every stair, they remember. And when someone comes who listens, who truly listens, Hogwarts answers. Mara whispered, "And what are we supposed to do with that?" The girl tilted her head. "That is your choice, but know this. You are now part of the memory. The castle holds you, just as you hold it." And with that, the painting faded, slowly, like fog lifting. The figures blurred, the room dimmed, and then the canvas went blank. The girls stood in silence. The moment stretched long, like a lull in time. Then Ellie turned to Mara, eyes wide but calm. "She said we're part of Hogwarts now, part of what it remembers." Mara nodded. "I've never felt more seen, not even in class, not even among friends." They sat together on one of the beds, letting the magic of the moment settle around them like stardust. That's when Ellie noticed something just above the fireplace, a new inscription carved gently into the stone. The quietest students often hear the loudest magic. The room had given them a truth, not a secret, not a mystery to be solved, but an understanding that Hogwarts didn't just teach spells and potions. It held space for hearts that needed to breathe, for students who didn't shine in the spotlight, but glowed gently in silence. Mara looked down at the medallion still hanging around Ellie's neck. It, too, now shimmered softly, like it had been activated. They both knew, without speaking, that their journey through the dormitory was reaching its end. The magic wasn't fading. It had simply given them what they needed. On a final walk around the room, they touched the carved bedposts, the smooth frame of the glowing mirror, the journal now brimming with voices across time. Every item whispered thank you in its own way. Before leaving, Ellie paused at the journal and opened it to their page. The ink shimmered gently. Underneath their message, a new line had appeared, not written by hand, but perhaps by the castle itself. They listened, and so the room remembered them. With quiet smiles, the girls stepped back into the corridor. The stone wall sealed behind them, smooth and ordinary once more, but in their hearts, something stayed open, wide and warm. The corridor outside felt quieter than before, as if it too had been changed by the girls' journey. The flickering torches seemed to glow warmer, and the very stones beneath their feet gave the faintest hum, like a heartbeat, gentle and steady. Ellie and Mara walked slowly through the dim hall, neither speaking, neither needing to. The stillness around them wasn't heavy anymore. It was comforting, like the castle was tucking them in, wrapping its age-old walls around them like a protective blanket. They reached the Ravenclaw common room door, the bronze eagle knocker still gleaming in the quiet. Before Mara could answer the riddle, the door swung open on its own, something it had never done before. They glanced at each other, then stepped through. Inside, the common room was bathed in soft silver moonlight. The stars beyond the high windows blinked slowly, lazily, as if even the sky was ready to rest. Books sat untouched on tables, parchment rolled neatly beside quills. No one else was around. It was as though the entire room had paused, holding its breath for their return. They stood for a moment, just looking around. Everything was so familiar, and yet something had shifted. Ellie sat down on the window seat, the same one she always did, but this time she held the medallion gently in her hands. Its glow had dimmed to a faint blue, like a nightlight preparing for sleep. She brushed her thumb across its surface, then whispered, "Thank you." Mara joined her. "Do you think anyone else has ever seen that room?" Ellie shrugged, smiling faintly. "Maybe, maybe not, but it found us for a reason." And that was enough. The need to question everything, to unravel every detail. It faded, replaced by something gentler. Not knowing was okay. Some mysteries were meant to rest, like stories with quiet endings. Later that night, the two girls tucked into their regular dormitory beds, surrounded by the soft breaths of other students, the rustle of bed sheets, and the quiet creaks of Hogwarts settling into sleep. But even here, in the ordinary space they'd always known, there was a new peace. Ellie lay awake just a moment longer, eyes tracing the ceiling beams, feeling the rhythm of the castle around her, that same deep pulse they'd felt outside the hidden dormitory. It was everywhere, in the stone, in the air, in her. She felt held, not just by the walls or the magic, but by the memory of the room, by the words in the journal, by the portrait girl's voice still echoing gently in her thoughts. The quietest students often hear the loudest magic. She turned onto her side, smiling softly, and let sleep come, slow, calm, and kind. And as the night deepened, somewhere far beneath the castle, hidden away behind an ordinary wall, the forgotten dormitory flickered once more with light, not bright or flashy, just a single soft candle on a bedside table, burning with the memory of two girls who listened. The castle remembered them, and they, in turn, would never forget what it meant to be remembered. And so, the castle slept once more, wrapped in moonlight, tucked beneath stars, held in the quiet hush of ancient enchantments. Somewhere behind a wall that didn't open for everyone, the hidden dormitory waited, not lost, not forgotten, just resting. The candle still glowed gently, its flame steady but soft, like a memory that warmed rather than burned. A place that revealed itself not to the loudest or the boldest, but to those who noticed, who listened to silence, who followed the feeling of being gently called. Ellie and Mara didn't seek it again, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't need to. Magic, they'd learned, wasn't always something you chased. Sometimes it came to you in the quietest moments, in the stillness between heartbeats, in a soft floorboard creak, in the hush of a hallway when no one else was awake. They carried the memory of the room with them, not like a secret, but like a comfort, a knowing that they were part of something old and kind and quietly alive. And perhaps, dear listener, there are rooms in your own story, waiting behind walls you haven't thought to question. Places full of peace, waiting to reveal themselves when you slow down and breathe deeply, when you walk gently, when you listen to the spaces in between sound. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy and your breath softens, remember, there is a magic that watches over you as quietly as moonlight on stone, as softly as candlelight in an enchanted room. You don't have to chase it. It's already here, around you, within you, warm and calm and timeless. Let your thoughts drift now, like feathers in a breeze. Let your body grow still. Let your mind wander gently into dreams where staircases turn and lanterns hum, and dormitories you've never seen might be waiting just behind the next quiet door. You are safe. You are seen. And in this quiet corner of the wizarding world, and perhaps in your own, the magic never truly sleeps. It just waits for those ready to rest. Sleep well, my dear dreamer. Hogwarts is holding you tonight. Good night.